Thanks for tuning in to Stay Sharp with Razor Leaf, your secret weapon for all things digital and products and manufacturing. In this episode, Michael Welti, our migration expert from the UK, is back again to discuss the complexities and pitfalls of data migration with our podcast team. The conversation emphasizes the importance of understanding source data, ensuring data quality, and the critical role of timing and rehearsals in the migration process. They share insights on common mistakes to avoid, making it clear that thorough preparation and analysis are key to preventing issues during and after migration. They identify the latent problems that may arise post-migration, the importance of security considerations, and the need for a well-planned migration strategy. Let's listen in.
Welcome back, everyone, to our podcast, Stay Sharp, the podcast about all things digital related to products and manufacturing. I am here, as always, with my co-host, Jonathan Scott.
Hey, everybody. And I love it when you do the intro, Jen. It's awesome.
You just not as comfortable with that, huh?
No, it's fine. It's fine. It's just I love listening to you do it. I think you do a great job at
it. Well, thank you very much. And we are back with our colleague, Michael Welti.
Hello. Good to be back.
Welcome back, Michael.
Yeah. So we have now done a couple of podcasts where we really dug into the process of data migration. The first one was focused primarily on process. The second was on some of the complexities that come along with that process. And a matter of fact, I recommend if you haven't listened to those, go back and listen to them. Don't consider this one the end-all be-all, because they kind of interrelate. I'd listen to them kind of in a loop because they do build on one another. But in that discussion, our last discussion, we determined maybe a good way to wrap all of it up is to talk about pitfalls and how to avoid them. So when you're getting into the data migration process, what are the biggest landmines? Where are they, and how do you avoid them? Because blowing legs off is never a good idea. So.
Agreed. I was thinking it a little more gently, like when you're taking your random walk down the digital transformation path, what do you not want to step in? That's what I was thinking. But
Okay. So, dog poop. Let's how to avoid the piles.
There you go. But it's good, right? I mean, it came up last time we were talking about this. I do think it's a good idea. There are a number of things that we could talk about. And I'm going to dive right in, Michael. I'm going to jump in with the one that I think is the most obvious, and maybe the one that people forget is when you're migrating, don't bring stuff you don't need and make sure you get everything you do need, right? I mean, is that the most obvious one to avoid?
It is. Don't put a lot of effort into stuff you don't want to bring across, but do put all the effort into stuff you need to make sure you have got there. And it comes down to really understanding kind of, what is your source system? What exactly are you trying to migrate across, and where are you going to? And also, does what you're trying to migrate fit into that new system? There's also kind of what choosing what not to bring across is what you're trying to migrate into a new system. The new system might not be able to handle it, represent it, or any of that sort of stuff. So you got to kind of consider where you're going to as part of that.
Well, that's a big gotcha, right? And I will say I've seen this one catch people. Luckily, I haven't seen it a lot, but I've been on projects with folks where they bring us in to help with a migration or to help with the deployment of the system. They've already picked the new target system, but what they didn't consider was that the new target system doesn't have a certain capability that they had data for in the source system, right? And to their credit, or maybe not to their detriment, I don't know exactly how to say it, but they were thinking of it. They don't do that thing in their source system anymore, right? So they thought, I don't need it in my new system. It's not a big deal. But what they missed was that, I did have data that was related to that I needed to bring over and I didn't want to lose. So, what do you do? That's tough.
It's a whole, it really comes down to for understanding your kind of source data in a lot of detail, and then knowing exactly what you want to do with it moving forward. And that kind of comes. It's not just a migration activity. It's something we talked about in the past. It's that you're not just transforming your data and migrating your data. You're migrating your processes and how you work, and making sure you've got everything you need in place to use it moving forward.
And not being too. I think the other pitfall I'll add in on that topic is not being too cavalier about it, because I have certainly. This maybe is advice to our audience directly, right? If you're not an expert at this, make sure you're leaning on someone and asking all the right questions who can help you answer it. Because I've talked with many business leaders who, I just need this. I just need that, right? Just do this for me, right? And they don't understand it. They don't spend the time to understand it. And even if there is an expert, they're going, but wait, I'm not sure you're going to like the result.
Yeah, but I bet,
damn the torpedoes,
I'll bet there's just as many people though that like, you know what? I just all of the data, everything that's there, I want it all over.
They're usually the two I hear. It's like, what do you want to migrate? It's either everything or just this. And if it's everything, you say, well, actually, do you really want the stuff here you don't really like, kind of workflows or history or some of the details or some different types you've not used for 20 years, or stuff that was migrated from a previous migration that's a meta anyway. Do you really need it? Is it important? So that's one side. The other side is, okay, if it's just this, okay, have you thought about that in the context of all the other bits that go with it?
Right.
And so it kind of it's understanding. Yeah, that both of you, where you're going from and where you're going to, in enough detail that you can kind of fully embrace that.
I think if I recall in our first podcast about data migration, we used the moving analogy for this. Like, okay, this is the point at which you're like, okay, you clear out some of the shit you haven't worn, you haven't used, you haven't, no, you don't actually need it. Yeah, but maybe I'll fit into this. Nah, right. let's just not worry about it right now.
One day. No, don't do that. Yeah.
Well, what are some other things? Like one that we talk about all the time is understanding your data, right? The quality of your data, not just the character, but the quality of it.
Exactly. I mean, if you think about it in terms of, so you've got a source system you've been using for a long time. Some systems can be quite flexible in how the users use it. Mm-hmm. If it's got that,
I like the way you politely say that. It can be quite flexible.
The English and their understatements.
Exactly. So if there is that level of flexibility in your source system, it means that your users have done things that they were meant to or didn't done in different ways and different representations. If you've got any system where it's required a lot of manual entry, things like that. So if you're going from like an Excel spreadsheet research where there's been a lot of manual entry, there'll be a lot of different ways and historical ways of representing data that's quite different. When you try and migrate that across, so on migration, you're basically taking everything across in one hit, as it were. That means that the rules you define have got to work for the entire data set, not just for the latest, but for all the legacy as well. That means that you've got to really understand what does all that data contain, and all that historical information, all those different ways of representing information. What's in there, so you know enough that when I migrated from here, these documents from here to here, that it's going to work. So the usual things are like kind of, I don't know, characters used, as it were. So in a text field as well, what characters you want. Are there any illegal in the target system? Are there illegal characters you're not allowed to use that we're using the source system? Those sorts of things.
I want to throw in a great example of that, right? And so IT folks will probably appreciate this example and story I'm about to tell. There was a thing 15 years ago or so, a SQL injection attack, right? There's a cybersecurity thing called a SQL injection attack. And what it meant was if you put text of a certain format into like a search engine or something on a website, you could hijack the system and do all kinds of crazy things with it. And what was the reason for that? Well, the reason for that was because there's certain characters that a database server like SQL would interpret a certain way, and it would take it as a command instead of a piece of data and that sort of thing. And so what changed about the world as a consequence? Well, turns out that 30 years ago when we stored data on a file system in Unix or whatever, a semicolon was fine. Turns out today, that's not so fine because it's a database command and you could end up with an issue and that kind of thing. All right, so there's this little arcane problem, right, that came about because of a cybersecurity thing that now you have to think about, to your point, Michael, about illegal characters, things you can't do anymore. You have to massage your data and you have to be aware of it. That's the pitfall, right?
Yeah. So really, so in our previous kind of podcast, we talked about the concept of kind of not just extract, transform, load, but extract, stage, analyze, transform, load. That analysis bit, you've got to know, based on here's the data for this particular attribute, here's the range of kind of characters that were used for that in that particular attribute. Will they go into the target system? Okay, I've got in my target system, I've got like a list of illegal characters I'm not allowed to use. I match the two together. So what do I do about those sorts of things? Understanding that. That was fairly simple. Things like revision sequence. I always kind of catch that. your target system may put certain requirements and ways on how it defines a revision sequence. A, B, C, 1, 2, 3, A.1, B.1, 2, all that sort of stuff. You've got to make sure that your source system, it will have its own way of doing things. As you migrate across, you've got to make sure that that revision sequence kind of can map into the target system. And it's not just, okay, here's the list of the letters that we use, as it were. It was, okay, in my source system, I went revision 1, 2, B, C, 3, 4, F.
Right.
So it's not just kind of looking at things in kind of isolation, but looking at the entire sequences that are used in the source system and say, right, how is that going to go into the new target system? Can it go into the new target system? That can be quite a tricky business decision, where some systems actually say, well, it's rare. Usually you can work out a way of getting the existing revision sequence into the target system as it is. Because obviously if you change a revision value on a drawing,
that's a big problem.
That has got big impact on how it goes. Mm-hmm. You want to keep and maintain that. So there's a lot of work there, but some target systems are quite kind of fixed and mandatory how it works. It says, no, this is how the sequence works. And so you've got to look at different ways of handling that, and maybe having the legacy revision in a different attribute, all that sort of stuff.
But generalizing the problem, right? I mean, if I just take this great examples we're giving, and I generalize it, I mean, the issue is you've really got to understand the constraints that your data has to live within, and then understand how it matches and doesn't match, and figure out what do you have to do to clean it up. What is the existing quality? Is it going to be a problem? Yeah. Is it going to be fine? But that's the thing you don't want to step in. You don't want to step in that in the middle of, all right, we're on Go Live weekend.
No, exactly. You got to know up front exactly. And it comes down to say, it's knowing what are the constraints of where I'm going to, and what exactly do I currently have in enough detail that you can plan out as part of that mapping exercise. We talked about mapping previously, but how you map from the system, source system, target system. You've got to know, here are the problems I've got to deal with. Here are the constraints I've got to deal with, and here's the problems at the point when you're doing that mapping. And it can get quite tricky. I mean, those attributes and kind of revision sequences are quite quantifiable. They're easy things to define as part of the analysis. And so in terms of defining quality of data, that's not too bad. Where it can get a bit more tricky in PLM systems, you talk about objects and links. Things interrelate, as it were. So you've got kind of assembly links to a subassembly, which links to a part.
Right.
As you migrate across, the way you can have all sorts of different problems with those sorts of structures. You're migrating things in the context of other things. So as you migrate across, you've got to make sure that kind of context and what it infers is also carried across too. If you've got a lot of historical information where people, that flexible system again.
Yes.
If users have found certain ways of abusing the system to get their data in, so it's sort of managed all right, they know that they've got certain workarounds to do. When you migrate that data across, it can cause a lot of challenges. So you've got that part, as part of the analysis, you've got to try and find these kind of contextual problems, the quality problems with your data, which can be quite tricky.
That closet that you shoved everything into, and you thought to yourself, I hope I never have to open that door because I don't know what's going to happen. Guess what? You're getting ready to open that door.
I mean, in terms of the pitfalls, I guess being honest about the skeletons in your closet to the person who's doing the migration up front is definitely a worthwhile thing, because they're going to come out regardless. And the quicker you can deal with them, the easier it will be.
And that brings up the next great pitfall, I think, right? Which is, we mentioned a second ago, and you mentioned it, timing. Timing matters. Things that are going to go wrong, the pitfalls you're going to find, or that you hope to not find. When do you find out about it? What does that matter? Because I think it matters a lot. But
it doesn't matter. So, I'm a big fan of doing as much analysis up front as I can to really understand exactly where I'm going from, what I'm going to, because it's better to find the problems at the point where you're defining the mappings rather than at the point when you're actually migrating the data.
Right.
If you're finding problems at the point where you've started migration and you find problems, that can cause all sorts of things to go wrong. So, and also the worst ones are the ones where you find out while you're migrating the data, once you've migrated about 80-90% of it. Because then you've got to think about, well, okay, it's now broken. What do I do? Or do I kind of reset everything back again? Or do I start again? Or do I? And it comes down to, so we want to try and find those problems as early as possible.
Yep.
And then kind of that's what it comes down to, and practice as much as possible. It comes in rehearsals
Indeed.
are kind of key. You got to go through. You want to go through at least quite a few iterations of this to test out. Because you do analysis. You understand the source system. You understand the target system. You put the two together. But the only time when you prove you're actually right is through those rehearsal process.
That's right. It's to try it, right? So you got to make sure you try it. That's the pitfall to avoid here. That's the thing not to step in is don't just assume you've got it right. Oh, I spent enough time in the analysis. Make sure you've rehearsed sufficiently. And that's different for different people, right? I mean, it's not a one-size-fits-all answer, but it's rehearse enough.
Rehearse enough. So try and find that line, because obviously a rehearsal could take a long time to do.
Sure.
But you want to make sure you've got enough of it covered that you can prove. And actually, the key bit for me is not have I migrated it and yes, it looks right. It's can I use it after I've migrated it? So, and it comes down to can the user go and use that data once it's been migrated? And that's usually a step that people sometimes forget is, okay, we've migrated it.
Looks good.
The users have a look. It looks good. Okay, have you tried to revise it and do a bit of design work on it? Because that's usually the key test.
Right. No, we haven't tried that. Oh, okay. Perhaps you should.
Perhaps because the last thing you want to find out is that you do what you think is a successful migration. It all looks okay, but on day one, no one can open a drawing or check out a drawing or modify a drawing.
That's when you know you really have a problem.
Then it doesn't matter how good it looks.
No, exactly. So it comes out. So it's that concept of really understand analysis, rehearse it. Once it's rehearsed, get someone to test it and try and use it. And then if that's then do it again and then go through the process, things like that. But timing is kind of key. And so with data migrations, all of those skeletons in the closets are going to come out because when you migrate stuff, you really get to know it really well. The earlier you can find out about those in the process, the better for everyone. Because you can plan for it.
The theme that we're getting at here, right, is think about all the things that could go wrong on that day. Like you just said, you've cut over, you're finished, everything looks good, and now you start working with it. What could go wrong, right? And we talked about you might be missing some data. You might have brought stuff that you didn't need and it's getting in your way. Mm-hmm. And we just talked about, okay, the quality, maybe what you brought across was junk or you couldn't bring some stuff across. And we were just touching on the timing, right? You didn't find it until the very end. One more on that. What else could go wrong? Here's one that happens. The moment that we think we're using the system, 8 a.m. Monday morning, after all this migration, guess what? We're not. It's still running. The migration's still running. Monday afternoon, it's still running.
Yeah, speed is kind of key. Yeah, I mean, this is one you've got to, so the migration process can take a long time, some of the ones, particularly where things like, so if you're doing kind of straight metadata to metadata, so like, I don't know, bill of materials to bombs, you might be able to do that over a weekend. Databases can be quite fast. You can do it one weekend. CAD, for instance, might need a lot of pre-processing as part of that process. Right. That can take weeks, months sometimes. And so you've got to work out a way of making sure that you can work out your migration process so that people can continue to working as long as possible and have as least downtime as possible. So the way we tend to do it in the past is the concept of you do kind of a big bulk migration, which takes however long it takes, as it were. After rehearsals, you test it, do bulk migration, and then you do small deltas. So you take the changes across so that you can get to the point of having like a go live weekend where on Friday night people stop using the source system and then Monday morning use the target system. But that those go live weekends need a lot of practicing. And this is where the rehearsals come into it a lot as well.
Yep.
Right.
Because you've got to know exactly how long that process takes to make sure, especially you've got a very tight window of time to do it in, to make sure it kind of works and it does everything you need it to so you can go live and start using the data.
And you just brought up one technique, right? I mean, the technique of do the bulk and then do some deltas at the end. There's scaling systems. There's all kinds of approaches, right? But the thing to avoid is make sure you don't get surprised by it. Make sure you know what that window looks like.
I guess this is where the rehearsals come into it quite a lot as well. That they provide your only real opportunity of getting an understanding of how fast it's going to work, what sort of throughput you get. Well, so you make sure that whatever you use to do your migration can give you enough metrics that you can measure how fast the process works so that you can then plan for the car moving forward.
It really does underscore how important those rehearsals are, because it's not just I'm listening to you guys. It's not just the timing and the process, but it is also, that's where you are first identifying problems, data that you've left behind, or that you brought over that you don't need, or it's unusable, or the quality, et cetera. Those rehearsals are key to, yes, you've done all your, hopefully, you've done all of your extraction, you've done all your analysis, so you think you know all of the things that you need to know, but it's in the rehearsals that you discover whether or not that was the case.
You're right. Yeah, there's those rehearsals when you get to prove that you're right in a less high pressure environment than just a go live. But also it's where you kind of gather your metrics and your performance into understand, okay, how long is this migration going to take? How exactly do I, how much downtime will we need to move fully from one system to the next? How do we transition between? What do we need to scale? Do we need to make certain processes faster? Do we need to get more machines involved? Do we need to do more things in parallel? And there's a lot of planning goes into those sorts of activities. And with any of these migrations that go live, there's usually quite a long list of kind of post go live activities. You've got to run scripts, things like that, to enable the system to be worked on that one. So planning what those are and how they fit into the process as well is kind of key.
So I want to switch gears a little bit, because a lot of what we've talked about so far, or appropriately, kind of in order, is the stuff that you do ahead of time, the stuff that you prepare for, you plan for, you check, you rehearse, to get you up to things that could be wrong on Monday morning when you're trying to say, all right, migration's done, let's start using the system. I want to talk about latent problems, things that you want to avoid that you're only going to find a week later, a month later, maybe a year later, that kind of thing. Because there are some of these that you want to watch out for. Now, you maybe fix them back in the planning, but you might not see them until later. So let me start with one. First one, I think this is awful, because you just have this pit in your stomach when you realize it, is there was a problem, but you didn't find it, whatever it is, for weeks, months later, and now you've added data on top of the data you migrated. Now, what do you do to fix it?
Yeah. And those ones can be quite challenging, because you've got to go back into the system and kind of first understand what exactly went wrong. Have you keeping kind of all of that process of extract, transform, load, as it were, that extract and transformation bit, making sure you've kept that information so you understand exactly what you did do to go from the source system to target system in the way that you can reuse it. Because you might find that problem you found in that particular drawing or document or whatever might be repeated in lots of other places. Right. So you're not just trying to fix that one instance, you're trying to locate, okay, has that problem occurred in lots of other places?
Right.
And also doing things, and you've got to make sure you do things in a way that's supported by whatever vendor system you're using as well.
This is another latent problem, right? Maybe you don't realize it.
Yeah, right. Because it comes down to, you might find a problem with the data that's been loaded that might cause a particular bug or something like that. If that problem was down to the way you loaded the data, and that way you loaded the data wasn't necessarily the supporting mechanism for approaching it, then you're kind of in a bit of a difficult situation. It might be that you need help from the vendor to help fix the problem, because it might be how part of their process or connector works and that. But they won't support you because you've not used an approved method to get the data into their system. And it's the difficult kind of area to be in.
Yeah. And I think that's, this is one of those, the devil is in the details, or can be, that there are sometimes, to solve some of the other problems we've talked about, like performance, where you want to use multiple techniques. Different vendors, different consultants like us, different people with different tools will use different techniques. Sometimes it's use the API of the system. Sometimes it's you go direct to the database to do certain things. You do certain techniques when you're pulling data out of the source, and other techniques when you're pushing it into the target. All these techniques, right, to your point, Michael, you have to think about, is there some problem that it might be embedding in my future that I'm not aware of? Is the vendor not going to support me because I did things a certain way? And some of it may be fine, and you want to use it, but others may not be, right? And you have to think about that.
It can be complicated, and it's that performance problem as well. So usually, a lot of the decision about the timings of how you've got to do things is dictated by, okay, for this type of data to be supported, I've got to use this mechanism to get the data into the system. That mechanism, really slow, but actually that's no choice. You've got to use it, so that you've got to take account into that speed as well as part of that process to handle it. and kind of in your planning and how timing and how things are going to work in terms of your project, you've got to kind of factor those things in.
Yeah, but if you don't think about these things that can happen after the fact, right? If you're just focused on that go live moment, you might miss that, not put it in your planning. And that's why we're talking about it now. Pitfall to avoid in the future by some action you take now. There's another one that I think of there. This does not happen as often because not everybody has this requirement, although everybody does have some security requirements. So the security topic is the one I want to raise. You've got data that's secured in your source system in some way, whatever those rules are, right? It's protected somehow. And then you're going to move it to your target system, which is also going to protect your data in some way, probably some different way, right? In the process, have you somehow leaked data? Have you exposed data that's supposed to be secured? And this could happen a number of ways, right? But it's one to watch out for. What should people be thinking of there, Michael?
It's the same thing as usual of kind of understanding your source system and your target system, not just kind of at a level, but really upfront understanding, okay, how am I representation of my source system? What are the security requirements represented? How am I going to do that in a target system? And also how am I now, in terms of migration, you go extra level on top of this, that the consultants that are working on it might not be allowed to actually do the migration because they're not securely allowed to do it. This is where, so what you have to do is almost develop your migration strategy on another system which got clean data on it, rehearse on there, and then help the customer run the migration on their target, on their system, on the secure stuff, so they can do it. Where it gets really important is making sure whatever tool you've got have got enough reporting capabilities that if you have problems, that it can identify problems in that secure one enough that you can then repeat them in your test one and work out strategies of how to deal with it. And that can get quite interesting.
And we're solving for the problem of the expert that knows how to do the thing is not the same person who can see the data, right? And it's that of looking at that, recognizing it potentially as a pitfall, and then working to avoid it with some mechanism on the project.
And then it's just making sure that you understand security requirements in here. It's a business process. Have I represented my security requirements enough in my target system that things are just as locked down? And that's, again, not necessarily a migration problem, it's more of that business transformation thing. Have I worked out how I'm going to use this new system and how it's going to work, and is it going to meet all my requirements?
Yeah. And I mean, back to the rehearsals, right? I've seen this gap happen too. Oh, I moved this data from here to here, but somehow in the complexity of the two security models, I missed the fact that this set of data ended up in this insecure place, and it used to be in a secure place.
I mean, and also in terms of things like kind of in PLM, we are migrating objects in the context of other objects.
Right.
Where it can get really interesting is you've got, say, for instance, a product in your source system that down at the lower levels uses parts that are in secure positions, as it were. When you migrate them across, one is if you're doing it project by project, as it were, it won't even see that those ones exist, as it were. So when it goes into the system, it can't open because it's missing parts that should be there. And that can get really, so it's kind of, and also we've done ones in a position where, as part of the project decision, you could say, we're not going to migrate no sensitive data will leave our source system. It's all going to stay in the source system.
Right.
We're only going to migrate non-sensitive information into the new target system. Same problem again, that those two parts at the lower levels are marked as sensitive, don't get migrated across. No one can open up their models in the target system.
Right.
And so it's down to, again, it's analysis, it's understanding what you've got, and then taking the business and say, right, well, to migrate these products, we need to take these parts. They're marked as sensitive. Is that correct or not? If so, what do you want to do about it? If not, how do we kind of change it around? That kind of data cleanup activity, as it were. So maybe they were misclassified or something like that in the source system. You can take it across, but you need to know about it up front before you start the migration, so you can kind of help handle and deal with that situation.
All right, Tutu. I introduced the topic this time, so
I know what's
coming. I know
what's coming.
It's my job to watch the time this time.
I bet we could come up with more pitfalls and things to not step in. But Jen has a good point.
I feel like this is the topic that just keeps on giving, and we could just continue this discussion for quite some time. And I'm actually going to do, rather than go point by point with what in the summary what we did, I'm going to actually do something similar to what you did on the last one. Is that we've had 3 different podcasts now, all on the topic of data migration, on process, on some of the complexities, and now on basically the pitfalls to look out for. But I think the high-level summary is really, as you're going through this process, you need to really understand your source system. You need to really understand your target system. And you really need to understand your own business and how you want to run things. It's the more I listen to the two of you talk about all the challenges here, it's all about being intentional with the way that you do things. And I think it's really the whole business, the digital transformation, right? We all grew up, because none of us are spring chickens here. We all grew up with it. Yeah, I will speak for myself. I am not a spring chicken. The hair color notwithstanding, because women color theirs. But it's basically, we started with CAD, we added PDM, we moved to PLM, but like when you're moving from a PLM system to another PLM system, you're experienced at that point, and that you should know the things that you need to, and to move intentionally to another system. That's a big decision, and it's just understanding all the different pieces and leading into expertise where you need to can make it a lot easier. So it's at a high level. How was that as a summary?
I think it was good. I've got an analogy I want to deliver as part of our summary, because I think a number of topics that we talked about are Goldilocks kind of topics, right?
Yes.
That you can go to the extreme when you're thinking about migrating data, and you can have porridge that's too hot and you can have porridge that's too cold. And what you want is the middle ground, the thing that's best for your business. It supports exactly what you were just saying about think about your business and what you need. But it's true whether you're talking about the amount of data to migrate, right? Don't take more than you need. Don't take less than you need. It's about like the number of rehearsals that you do. Rehearse enough, not too much, because you're going to waste time and money, but not too little, because if you don't do it enough, you're going to end up with a mistake, and it's going to cost you more in the end, right? So it's every one of these aspects. Just think about, I think, the Goldilocks approach to it. What's right for you? What's too much? What's too little? What's just right?
I like that analogy.
Yeah, Alex.
All right. So we'll end with that. We'll end with the Goldilocks strategy to data migration. I want to thank you, Jonathan, for being here with me as always. And Michael, for joining us. It's been a fascinating several podcasts. And
thank you, Michael.
I'm sure that I have a sense we'll be back at some point.
Anytime.
We've really enjoyed having you. And to all of our listeners, thank you for listening. Interested in hearing any of the stories you have, good and bad, about data migrations, anything that we didn't cover, or on this specific topic or any other topics you want to hear about. This is intended to be part of a conversation, and the conversation is more interesting with you in it. So please reach out to us. We'd love to hear from you. And until next time, stay sharp.
Thanks for being here and listening to this episode of Stay Sharp with Razor Leaf. If you like this podcast, please be sure to hit the like button and subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast platform or on our YouTube channel. And if you have any questions, we'd love to hear from you. Just leave us a comment on this post or send us an email to podcast@razorleaf.com. Until next time, stay sharp.